The Federal High Court in Abuja has given Nnamdi Kanu and his legal team 14 days to submit a no-case submission. His next trial date has been set for July 18, 2025. The Department of State Services, DSS, has increased security at its headquarters, where Nnamdi Kanu is detained. Movement around the facility is now heavily restricted, and new surveillance measures have been implemented. For the first time, the Department of State Services has publicly released their contact details, urging citizens to report any suspicious activity near the facility to help safeguard Nnamdi Kanu's health and safety. Only Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers and family members are allowed to visit him under strict conditions and on scheduled dates. 7 types of visitation rules and limitations have been enforced by the Department of State Services. Omoyele Sowore, once accused of using Nnamdi Kanu's name for political gain, shocked many by holding a live session on social media where he condemned the Nigerian justice system and called for Nnamdi Kanu's release. Omoyele Sowore and Nnamdi Kanu's legal team filed a petition to the International Criminal Court, outlining 5 major legal points, including accusations of state-sponsored kidnapping and human rights violations by both the Nigerian and Kenyan governments. The petition identifies 3 prominent figures allegedly involved in the abduction of Nnamdi Kanu: former Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, former Kenyan High Commissioner to Nigeria Wilfred Machaji, and former Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari. Prince Emmanuel Kanu, Nnamdi Kanu's younger brother, has reached out to the United States, European Union, and United Kingdom, demanding international investigations into Nnamdi Kanu's arrest and calling out misinformation against the indigenous people of Biafra. The United Kingdom has announced it will now offer consular assistance to Nnamdi Kanu, including legal support, family communication, monitoring of his treatment, diplomatic advocacy, emergency help, and public awareness, though many view this move as too late. Nnamdi Kanu has been widely praised across Nigeria and called a prophet, especially after his earlier warnings about Fulani herdsmen violence came true. The indigenous people of Biafra officially declared him a prophet through a statement published by some media outlet comparing his warnings to those of biblical prophets. Social media users are revisiting old statements and tweets made by Nnamdi Kanu years ago, especially his warnings about the Fulani herdsmen, asserting he foresaw the current security crises and structural imbalance in Nigeria. More lawyers from across Nigeria, especially the southeastern region, have volunteered to join Nnamdi Kanu's legal team as his next court appearance on July 18, 2025, at the Federal High Court in Abuja approaches. The court has given Nnamdi Kanu's legal team 14 days to file a no-case submission, arguing that the Nigerian government has failed to present credible evidence against him on charges like terrorism, treasonable felony, and incitement. Lawyer Aloy Ejimakor has drafted a strong no-case submission, stating that the prosecution's evidence is inadmissible, unreliable, and lacks legal weight, especially social media posts and newspaper articles presented in court. The draft states that prosecution witnesses and documents do not establish the mental intent required for terrorism or incitement charges, and that freedom of expression does not equate to terrorism. The no-case submission also highlights that Nnamdi Kanu's extraordinary rendition from Kenya was illegal under international and Nigerian law, undermining the credibility of the entire trial. The legal submission emphasizes abuse of court processes and calls on the judiciary to recognize the violations in how Nnamdi Kanu was brought to Nigeria, urging for a fair and constitutionally sound trial. A United States official reportedly attended the courtroom proceedings in Abuja allegedly sent under the directive of President Donald Trump to observe the trial and report back on the fairness of the Nigerian judicial process. Meanwhile, public and international support for Nnamdi Kanu continue to grow, with some analysts mentioning that Nnamdi Kanu's case is gaining more attention both locally and internationally, with increasing public sympathy and legal solidarity across Nigeria and abroad. In the heart of Abuja, at the heavily fortified headquarters of the Department of State Services, a storm of global attention, tension, and concern continues to build around the condition and treatment of Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. On the surface, it may appear that all is calm inside the black-walled building located within the capital's security belt. But inside those high concrete walls, behind locked corridors, restricted passageways, and under the watchful eyes of armed operatives, a man sits in solitude. His name is Nnamdi Kanu, and his name alone has shaken governments, moved crowds, and now draws attention from foreign nations, international legal bodies, human rights observers, and millions of his supporters across the world. The courtroom drama playing out in the Federal High Court of Nigeria is not just a matter of legal procedures. It has become a symbol of justice, oppression, national identity, and the fragile relationship between the Nigerian government and the indigenous people of Biafra. Recently, the Federal High Court in Abuja gave Nnamdi Kanu's legal team precisely 14 days to file what is known in legal terms as a no-case submission. This legal filing allows a defendant, through their legal team, to argue that the prosecution has not presented sufficient evidence to warrant continuing the trial. In other words, it asks the court to dismiss the case altogether on the basis that the prosecution has no real case. The court, led by a federal high court judge whose name is being withheld due to security concerns, scheduled the next hearing for July 18, 2025, a date that is already stirring public interest and causing supporters to organize vigils and demonstrations. Behind the headlines, the Department of State Services has significantly tightened security around Nnamdi Kanu's place of detention. The Abuja DSS facility, long known for its strict protocol, now operates almost like a military garrison. New surveillance systems have been installed. The entire neighborhood surrounding the compound has witnessed increased checkpoints, restricted access, and heavy police presence. Residents and workers in nearby buildings have reported unusual police activity and random questioning. For the first time in its history, the Department of State Services has gone as far as to publicly release their official contact channels, requesting that any Nigerian citizen who notices suspicious behavior or threats around the detention area report it immediately. The move, while seen by some as a gesture of transparency, has sparked suspicion from others, especially those who believe that the Department of State Services is trying to control the narrative surrounding Nnamdi Kanu's treatment. Strict visitation rules now govern who can see Nnamdi Kanu and under what conditions. His lawyers and immediate family members are the only individuals granted access, and even then, the rules are extremely tight. Visitation is allowed only on certain scheduled days, for limited periods, and in rooms heavily monitored by security operatives. According to confidential sources close to his legal team, there are 7 specific restrictions now enforced. These include body searches of all visitors, limited physical contact, complete prohibition of mobile phones or recording devices, surveillance during the visit, signing of non-disclosure agreements, delays in visitor processing, and sudden cancellations without prior notice. These rules have made it increasingly difficult for legal communication and emotional support to reach the man who has been detained since 2021. following what many describe as a state-sponsored international abduction. One of the most unexpected voices to rise in support of Nnamdi Kanu is that of Omoyele Sowore, the former presidential candidate, human rights activist and founder of Sahara Reporters. Omoyele Sowore, who had previously been accused by some Biafran supporters of leveraging Nnamdi Kanu's name for political gain, took to social media in a lengthy live broadcast that left thousands stunned. In the video, Omoyele Sowore directly condemned the Nigerian government's handling of Nnamdi Kanu's arrest, detention and trial. He went as far as calling the Nigerian justice system compromised and used the opportunity to call for Nnamdi Kanu's unconditional release. His words were sharp and unapologetic. In a surprising move, Omoyele Sowore then collaborated with Nnamdi Kanu's legal representatives to submit a detailed petition to the International Criminal Court, headquartered in The Hague, Netherlands. This petition, according to insiders, contains 5 powerful legal accusations, including state-sponsored kidnapping, torture, illegal rendition, suppression of political dissent, and violation of international human rights law. What made this petition particularly explosive were the names attached to the abduction of Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya in June of 2021. The document explicitly named 3 senior political figures: Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, the former president of Kenya; Wilfred Gisuka Machage, the late former Kenyan High Commissioner to Nigeria; and Muhammadu Buhari, the former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. These names, once pillars of political power in Africa, are now listed in a document requesting criminal accountability on an international scale. At the center of this diplomatic and legal storm is Prince Emmanuel Kanu, the younger brother of Nnamdi Kanu. Determined and often emotional, Prince Emmanuel Kanu has been relentless in seeking international attention and justice for his detained brother. He has written to major governments, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, calling for independent investigations into the events that led to the secret abduction of Nnamdi Kanu. In one of his most recent statements, Prince Emmanuel Kanu expressed deep concern about what he described as a campaign of misinformation against the indigenous people of Biafra, which he claims has been used to justify unlawful actions by state actors. According to him, the movement for Biafran self-determination is peaceful and democratic, and any attempt to link it with terrorism is politically motivated. The United Kingdom's recent decision to offer consular assistance to Nnamdi Kanu has been met with mixed reactions. While some see it as a positive development, others view it as an overdue and insufficient gesture. The consular assistance includes monitoring his trial, ensuring access to legal aid, facilitating family communication, and providing diplomatic advocacy in cases of human rights violations. However, critics argue that the United Kingdom should have taken action the moment it was discovered that one of their citizens had been abducted across international borders in breach of international law. Nnamdi Kanu holds both Nigerian and British citizenship, and many of his supporters believe the United Kingdom should have used its diplomatic influence to protect him much earlier. Within Nigeria, Nnamdi Kanu continues to command respect, reverence, and deep loyalty, especially in the southeastern region. He is no longer seen by his supporters merely as a political leader. Many now call him a prophet. This belief gained traction after several of Nnamdi Kanu's past public statements and broadcasts, where he warned about the rise of Fulani herdsman violence and the deepening ethnic tensions across Nigeria, were revisited online. Videos from years ago are now circulating widely, showing Nnamdi Kanu making chillingly accurate predictions about the very crises Nigeria is currently grappling with. Supporters have drawn comparisons between him and figures from biblical history, calling him a modern-day seer sent to warn his people. The indigenous people of Biafra officially echoed this sentiment, releasing a public statement that hailed him as a prophetic figure whose foresight deserves recognition, not persecution. In anticipation of the July 18th court appearance, more lawyers have volunteered to support his legal battle. These legal professionals, most of whom come from the southeastern states of Anambra, Enugu, Abia, Imo, and Ebonyi, have offered pro bono services, citing conscience and constitutional duty. Among them is barrister Aloy Ejimakor, who has emerged as one of the most vocal and influential legal minds behind Nnamdi Kanu's defense. Aloy Ejimakor has authored a compelling draft of the no-case submission. In that document, he argues that the prosecution has failed to present any admissible or credible evidence that would support the charges of terrorism, incitement, and treasonable felony. According to him, the majority of the evidence presented so far has included social media posts, newspaper articles, and unverified reports that do not meet legal standards for admissibility in a criminal court. More importantly, the document emphasizes that none of the prosecution's witnesses have been able to establish that Nnamdi Kanu had the intent to incite violence or commit acts of terrorism. In legal terms, the requirement of mens rea, or criminal intent, is critical. Without it, no conviction can be legally sustained. The defense insists that the mere expression of political beliefs, especially in the context of self-determination, cannot be classified as terrorism. The legal team also asserts that the foundation of the entire case is compromised by the way Nnamdi Kanu was brought into the country. His abduction from Kenya, executed without a formal extradition process, is in clear violation of both Nigerian and international laws. This, according to the defense, is not a minor procedural issue. It strikes at the heart of judicial integrity. The no-case submission goes even further to accuse the prosecution of abusing the court process. It urges the judiciary to examine the legality of the entire case and recognize the violations that occurred during Nnamdi Kanu's abduction and detention. The document concludes by calling for the immediate dismissal of all charges and the release of Nnamdi Kanu as a matter of justice and constitutional responsibility. Amid all this, the presence of international observers has added a new dimension to the unfolding courtroom drama. A high-ranking official from the United States was spotted in the courtroom during one of the recent hearings. According to reports, the official was allegedly sent under the directive of former President Donald Trump, who still maintains influence within certain political circles and advocacy groups. The presence of an international observer from such a powerful nation has reinforced the idea that Nnamdi Kanu's case is no longer a local affair. It is now a matter of international interest, attracting attention from diplomatic missions, legal watchdogs, human rights organizations, and civil society groups around the globe. Back on the streets of Nigeria, especially in southeastern towns and cities, the sentiment continues to shift more heavily in Nnamdi Kanu's favor. Posters, graffiti, murals, and vigils have popped up in places like Onitsha, Aba, Sowore, and Enugu. Social media platforms are flooded daily with hashtags, video tributes, legal updates, and emotional messages from supporters. Street protests and town hall meetings continue to highlight not only the demand for his release, but also broader calls for justice, restructuring, and self-determination. As the date of July 18th approaches, it is becoming increasingly clear that this trial is about much more than the guilt or innocence of one man. It is a test of Nigeria's democratic values, legal institutions, and commitment to human rights. It is also a reckoning with history and the unresolved questions of identity, justice, and federalism in a country still struggling to unite its many nations within a single flag. The outcome of this case, whichever way it goes, will leave deep marks on the conscience of the country and the memory of its people. Nnamdi Kanu remains behind the walls of the Department of State Services facility. But outside those walls, the voices calling his name are growing louder, clearer, and more determined than ever. They believe in his cause, they believe in his prophecy, and more than anything, they believe he deserves a fair trial, if not outright freedom. The world is now watching, and history is already taking notes. In the final weeks before the highly anticipated court appearance on July 18th, the air around Abuja, and indeed across the southeastern part of Nigeria, has become charged with emotion, anxiety, and hope. For millions of Biafran supporters and human rights defenders, Nnamdi Kanu is not just a man undergoing trial. He has become a symbol of resilience, a voice for the oppressed, and a representation of the larger fight for dignity, justice, and self-determination. Every step taken by his legal team, every word spoken in court, and every public action by the Department of State Services is being watched closely by both local and international observers. The situation surrounding his detention has now morphed into a serious international issue, one that transcends Nigeria's borders and involves fundamental questions of law, sovereignty, and human rights. Even while behind bars, Nnamdi Kanu's health condition has been a growing source of concern. According to close family members, his health has deteriorated further in the past few weeks. Prince Emmanuel Kanu, his younger brother, confirmed during a press interview that the medical needs of Nnamdi Kanu were not being fully addressed by the Department of State Services. He described a worrying pattern in which medical recommendations made by specialists were either delayed or ignored altogether. On several occasions, Nnamdi Kanu's lawyers filed motions requesting better access to medical treatment, including specialist care outside the facility. Each time, the Department of State Services responded with vague assurances that he was being well taken care of, but evidence presented by the legal team suggested otherwise, including documentation of missed prescriptions, medical negligence, and deterioration in vital signs. These claims were enough to prompt the attention of international human rights groups, who began raising alarms about the possibility of cruel and inhuman treatment. One of the most serious accusations to emerge in recent weeks is the claim that Nnamdi Kanu is being kept in near total isolation. This type of confinement, often referred to as solitary confinement, has been condemned by the United Nations as a form of psychological torture when extended beyond a certain number of days. According to legal experts familiar with the case, Nnamdi Kanu has been kept in a controlled room without meaningful human interaction, except during brief visits from his lawyers and family. Supporters and analysts argue that this form of treatment is not only inhumane, but deliberately calculated to weaken his mental and emotional strength ahead of trial. This troubling pattern has led to louder calls from within Nigeria and abroad for transparency and accountability. In an open letter addressed to the Nigerian president, a coalition of 125 civil society organizations urged the government to grant independent observers, including representatives from Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, unrestricted access to assess Nnamdi Kanu's condition. The letter emphasized that any government that claims to be democratic must allow third-party oversight, especially in politically sensitive trials. The world is watching. His people are waiting. And history is already carving his name into the pages of this long and painful chapter in Nigeria's journey. Whether the next step leads to freedom or further trial, what cannot be denied is that Nnamdi Kanu's voice has reached beyond the four walls of his detention, beyond the gates of the Federal High Court, and into the hearts of millions who now see in him a symbol of the struggle for justice and truth. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.